how are you? I am going to be reading today. This book is called Our Grandmother's Stories. So in May of last year, I was at an antique store and I saw it and I thought it was just the most beautiful color and I really wanted to get it, but I didn't. And I had thought about it for a while after, and then in December I went back to that antique store and it was still there, so I knew it was meant to be, and I got it. It seems very old, and for some reason it seems a little spooky to me. It might not be. But I haven't read it yet, and I've had it for almost a year, so I guess we shall learn together if it's spooky or not. I don't know if you could see that picture very well, but underneath that it says Emma and Annie in the country. It says something right here as well. I believe it's a name, and then I think it says November 41, but I'm not fully sure if I'm correct. And then the first page says Our Grandmother's Stories and Aunt Kate's Fireside Memories. So the first chapter is called Lost in the Woods. It is a delightful evening in early autumn. The silver moon is shining in the window, throwing its mellow light on the curling locks and smiling faces of a group of happy children. And just veiled in the shadows sits the dear old grandmother, about to commence one of her true stories, which she does in the following words. 50 years ago, the place now occupied by a populous town in New Hampshire was a wild and thinly inhabited region. There I was born and dwelt until about 6 years of age. Then my father removed his family to the then town of Portland, Maine, since become a great city. Our situation was quite solitary, as our nearest neighbors were 2 or 3 miles distant, and in going to their houses we were obligated to pass through a thick forest, which at that time was frequented by wild animals. Those angry growls I have often heard, for they sometimes ventured quite near to our lonely habitation, as they had no objection to whatever plunder they might chance to obtain in the shape of hens, chickens, geese, etc. It was primeval, a lonely place, and to me beautiful, for it was my home, and it contained those dear to me in life. A beloved father, a tender mother, brother, sisters, all were there, and besides them, the broad fields of waving corn, their shining blades, the tall, dark forest trees that I had loved, which even then, a child as I was, had to me a language of their own. Even now, after the lapse of many years, these early recollections come over me with intense reality. Again I see the humble home, the moss-covered rock upon which I often climbed in childish glee. Again I hear the whispering forest trees and the joyous singing of the birds. Oh, I was a happy child, although none of the gilded toys or delightful storybooks for children, now so common, had ever found their way to our secluded home. But years have passed since then, and left the imprint of care and sorrow on my once smooth brow. The dear ones who dwelt in that home with me are gone, all gone. But to my story, one bright summer afternoon, my father's hired man, John, was going 2 or 3 miles from home with a cart to get hay. Myself and brother thought it would be good fun to ride upon the top of the load, and we asked to leave with John. Our request was granted, and we seated ourselves in the hay cart, and who so happy as we? Through the woods we went, down the meadows beyond where John was to get the hay. After playing there a while, we strayed into the adjacent woods, where on every side we found something to charm, until we had penetrated further into the deep dark forest than we had ever been before. At length, tired for our rumbles, and worn by the deepening shadows of the dense woods, we attempted to retrace our steps in the meadow. But alas, we had utterly lost our way. There was no one to guide us back to the narrow path we had quitted some hours before. After searching a long time in vain for the path, we forced our way through the tangled bushes and suddenly emerged into the meadow where we had left John. But no John was to be found. We called aloud, but no answer came. Alas, he had forgotten us. We were alone in that gloomy place. My brother, who was younger than myself, began to grow weary and begged to go home. But alas, I could not guide. His tired feet, for I too was weary, and an indescribable fear took possession of my mind. I tried to comfort my little brother by telling him, perhaps John will return for us, but it rapidly grew dark, and the stars came twinkling into the clear evening sky, and then the thought of home, to the dismal forest, where dwelt wild animals, brought feelings of terror. The agony of which I distinctly remember to this day. Well, we ran to and fro in the meadow, the tears streaming from our eyes until we reached a fence that was placed alongside the woods. We climbed up on the fence and again devoured to make ourselves heard, but nothing answered save echo, and we were in despair. Now, my dear children, I suppose you are anxiously waiting to know how we found our way home. There was a man named Otis who lived a long way from us, as the wood and mowing lot were both between his house and my father's. It happened on that evening he was sitting in the doorway of his cottage, enjoying the sweet evening breeze, when there came to his ears sounds that to him seemed those of distress. He listened a while, then went in and told his wife and sons Those who were just partaking of a supper of sweet milk and bread, rendered doubly so by a day's hard work in the sunny hay-field, they followed him to the door, and presently they heard the sounds that had disturbed the old man. "Is that a voice of distress?" he said. "And it comes from yonder forest. Up, boys, take the lantern, for it will soon be dark. Go and find the cause of these strange cries." The young men, though wearied with the labor of that long hot day, hesitated not. They at once set forth on their errand of mercy. Suffice it to say, at length found us, nearly exhausted by our efforts to make ourselves heard, and the terror that had seized us. They kindly took us in their arms. Soothing words, promising us that we should be restored to our home in a very short time. They carried us to their house, where their good mother, upon seeing our pitiable condition, prepared us a comfortable supper, put us in a clean bed, and then sent her youngest son to my father's to let them know we were safe. It happened that my father was absent from home, and my mother, who was an invalid, had retired at an early hour, thinking her female domestic would faithfully perform her duty to us. As to John, he was not at all concerned about us. He thought we should find our way home. Somehow, but when he was told how much we had suffered, he began to see how careless he had been, and you may be assured he was never again entrusted with the care of those children who had been subjected to so much fear and suffering in consequence of his inexcusable forgetfulness. Little Annie was so much interested in this story, she said she should wish to hear grandmother tell it again. However, she was willing at that time to say good night. That was the first chapter. The next one is short, so I will read that one as well. This one is called Bell Hanging. "Tell us another story, grandmother," said the 2 or 3 voices, "another of your true stories." And the grandchildren again gathered around their gentle and affectionate relative, prepared to listen attentively to the story. "Well, my dear grandchildren, I will tell you something this evening which I hope will show you, as it has done me, of the loveliness and importance of affectionate obedience to our parents. It happened a great many hours ago. On my way, I called for one of my schoolmates, the sweet and gentle Peggy, whom we all loved dearly for her affectionate and kind disposition. So, Peggy, I've called for you to go with me and see the bell hung." "I don't know as I can go," said Peggy. "I have not yet asked Mother to let me go. But come in, Sarah, and I will soon tell you whether I may go." I took a seat and Peggy entered another room, where I distinctly heard her say, "Mother, are you willing to let me go and see the bell hung this afternoon? Here's Sarah Baxter, waiting for me." "Well, my dear," said Mrs. White, "do you wish to go? I should much like to go. A great many of our schoolers are going." "But, Mother, it is just as you please. I am content to do just as you think best." What a rare proof to myself was the reply of this lovely child. What a contrast did my own conduct present. Not that I had really done anything bad, but I had been anxious and restless until I had obtained my mother's consent. And sweet Peggy White, so calm, so pleasant, and willing to abide by her mother's judgment, humbled me so much that although we witnessed the scene of the bell hanging, my enjoyment was marred of my own unworthiness, and more than once I fancied I heard the gentle voice of my friend saying, "It is just as you please, Mother." It was a good lesson for me, one that I had never forgot. And now, my dear children, I wish you to remember it too, and when you feel the desire to importune your mother, or anything, remember Peggy White. Be gentle and obedient like her, for such a conduct is well-pleasing. But my children, it is time for you to say good night. Some future time, Grandmother will tell another story. I have a perfect little bookmark. My dad got me this at the same antique store. It's an old postcard with writing. I can't read the writing very well, but I always think it's really charming to have postcards because they meant something to someone. And there is a stamp in the middle that says St. George, September 22, 1946. So that's pretty crazy, but really cool. So it is the perfect bookmark for my book. I hope you enjoy those stories. I would like to continue reading this book with you. It's definitely not as spooky as I thought it was going to be, but we have only read 2 stories. I think maybe just because the book is so old and it's called My Grandmother's Stories that it seems creepy to me, but it is a charming book so far, and I'm very happy I got it. So, I will see you soon, and until then, have a wonderful day.